Welcome back to the ETF Inspector. It is Saturday, November 8th, but this video will be premiering on Sunday the 9th, and this is our week look ahead and payment guesstimate video for ULTY and SLTY. They are YieldMax's Ultra Option Income Strategy Fund and Ultra Short Option Income Strategy Fund. Before we get started, a reminder, I'm on X if you don't follow me already, at ETF_Inspector1. I let you know when videos are premiering, and I repost all the different stuff from all the ETFs we all like so much. All right, so let's get right into it. ULTY had a very rough week, as you can see, down 7.5% over the course of the week. Now, a small portion of that is from the distribution, 7.88 cents per share, but that doesn't really make that much of a difference when your just about $5 fund drops by nearly 50 cents over the course of the week. So painful for sure. SLTY, on the other hand, had the exact opposite week. So over the course of the week, even with paying out I think it was about a 53-cent distribution, they were still able to climb in share price by 2.8%, ending nearly $1 or more than $1 more than they started the week. All right, we'll take a look at our charts. We've got all the uploaded holdings information, and we've uploaded or updated the information on implied volatility. So we'll start off. ULTY had approximately 280 trades over the course of the week. They sold shares of Strategy on Monday along with their options trades. Tuesday was just options trades. Wednesday, they sold Robinhood, Rocket Lab, and Upstart shares along with trading options. Thursday, they bought back into Oklo. They've been out of the fund for a little while. And then they sold Bitmine Immersion and Rigetti. And then on Friday, they bought into Astera Labs and sold their Lucid Group shares. All right, trades over the course of the week. This is options trades only. They lost 3.6 million on Monday, made 23.9 million on Tuesday, $728,000 gain on Wednesday, $34 million gain on Thursday, and $74 million gain on Friday, for a total of $129 million in options trading income. So first step, we take a look at the estimate income. That is dividing the income by the quantity of outstanding shares. And that comes to 29 cents a share. So they did great options trading. However, we had a whole lot of different things that they were selling out of. You know for a fact that the selling of about $78 million worth of Strategy was a loss. Not $78 million loss, but it was a large loss because Strategy has done nothing but drop. We also know, what do we know? Robinhood has been down a big chunk lately, but that's probably taking a profit anyway, because if you remember right before Robinhood got put on the S&P, that they were in that like $100 range. So that's going to be a gain. Rocket Lab, we had lots of purchases at different prices. Upstart, I'm almost certain it's a loss. Now, I have the data. Let's see. Yeah, so they're down 43% over the last 3 months, 25% over the last month. So any way you slice it, we're taking a loss selling those. The thing is, I am able to go back. I got 9,000 lines worth of data that we would be able to figure out all the gains and losses on ones that we have information on. But there's two different issues with it. Some, they own the shares prior to me starting this coverage, so I wouldn't be able to. And so then at that point, it makes everything worthless if I figure out some of the numbers and not the others. Rigetti's probably going to be a gain. And then the other side of it, they have bought multiple different times, so it's not like I can just go back to one purchase line item. It's going to be tons of them. And then I don't know, you have to select whether when you're selling funds, are you selling the first in, first out, or the first in, last out? So that without having that information, I still don't know. It's not like you're selling off of your average price. So we're not really able to come up with good answers with that. The only time I do it is if literally a week or two or a couple weeks ago, they completely bought in and then they completely sold out. It makes it much easier. So they did do well as far as the options traded side of things. I would probably venture a guess that the losses outweighed the gains on closing out of shares. But either way, 29 cents isn't going to be our payment on our $4.50 fund. So next, we're going to take a look at the IV estimate to try and see if we can come up with something a little better. I decided I want to try to streamline this portion because this tends to make the videos pretty long. So what we're going to do, usually on this part of the video, I go down line by line on each of the underlyings, tell you what percentage of weight that it is within the fund, and its 30-day IV that has just been updated today, and whether it was an increase or a decrease. But I don't know that people actually literally want every one of those details. So what I'm going to tell you is we'll go up and down and see that the average weighting would be 5.8%. So as we scroll through, we'll just say a firm is less than average. Astera Labs is just under the average. Cipher Mining, less than average. Coinbase, I believe it's our largest holding, 9%. Core Weave's another high one, above average, 7.3%. Hims and Hers, very close to average, 5.56. Robinhood, well above average, one of the highest holdings, 8.8%. Iron's above average at 6. MP Material Corp's at 4.5, that's below. Oklow's at 3.6, that's below. Palantir, 6.3% is a little above. Quantum Computing, 4.7% is below. Rocket Lab, another one pretty high, 8.6%. NewScale Power, another one that's high, 7.9%. SoFi's on the lower end with 3%. SoundHound right about average at 5.8%, and Symbotic a little over average at 6.14%. Now when I go to the implied volatility, we had 7 increase over the course of last week, 8 decrease, 2 remain the same, or it might just be that they, it's going to be remain the same. That'll also be the symbol I use if it was newly added. And then we have put spreads that are not factored into the calculation, but they would be factored into YieldMax's calculation. I just don't have a way to weight them in my calculation. So 3 of them increased and 2 decreased in implied volatility. So we're just going to kind of hit the highlight reel of which ones are nice and high, right? We need to be making more than 85% yield because they like to pay around an 85% yield. So Astera Labs is close at 86. Cipher Mining is one of the big ones, 122. CoreWeave's another big one at 106. Galaxy doesn't factor into my calculation, but we do know that it's helping us to achieve the higher implied volatility with a 96.4. Iron's one of the big ones, 123.9%. Oklo, we just brought it back into the fund. They're high at 121. Quantum Computing, 118 is a high one, as well as Rocket Lab, 104, nice and high. We've got a good chunk that are high. NewScale Power, over 112. SoundHound, 96+%, and Symbotic, 121%. So when we put all that into our calculation, we come up with 92.79% implied volatility. So that's an average, that's a weighted average, and that's just of the underlying, whereas in reality, the options are generally going to be trading at a higher implied volatility than the stock itself, and they actually play into the real calculation that we don't have the ability to do 100%. But in any case, we're still high. We're above the 85% average, so it shouldn't be difficult for them to achieve that when collecting premium selling calls in this fund. All right, so that's going to be part of our calculation for the IV estimate. The other part is the share price at close, which is much lower than what it was last week. We combined the two that both decreased, and it gives us a guesstimate of 8.15 cents. Well, that's an IV estimate. From there, we're just going to come up with our own final. And based on last week's payment, they paid 7.88 cents per share. 7.75 will be a small decrease from that, but it would make sense to be less than last week if the IV is lower than last week and the share price is lower than last week. So I'm going to guess 7.75 cents. And I should point out on each day of trading, we have our realized gains and losses on the first line that we talked about. But this is unrealized. This is just how the share values moved throughout the week. So they went down in value $56 million on Monday, $143 million down on Tuesday. A little bit of a bounce, $57 million increase on Wednesday, before dropping $161 million on Thursday and finishing out with an increase of $6.9 million Friday. So the value of the shares within the fund dropped by $296 million over the course of last week. That was partially offset by the increases from selling options, which a large portion of that number actually came from the protective puts. All right, but 7.75 cents is going to be my guesstimate for this week. Next, we're just going to look at the options ahead for the week to see how we are set up going into the week. On average, our closest to the money call is sold at about 4.5% out of the money, and our second call, so it's not all have a second call, but if they do, those average out to be 10.3%. Okay, so a firm holdings is starting with calls in the money at 72, 2.2%, and out of the money at 74, 0.5%. They're also selling puts. So if you have a line item here with a P, that's just a reminder that even though it's got a highlighted color, which is generally what it means is we sold an option, but generally we sell calls in this fund. It's a collar strategy, so they buy the shares, sell calls to generate income, buy puts to protect the shares. But sometimes they're selling puts to help pay for the protective put, to help offset the cost of those, or to just add to the premium collected to help hit that 85% we're trying to do. So they actually talked about it last week on Spaces with YieldMax. I think Mr. Mike Coe brought it up, and I always say, they're selling puts to help pay, to help generate the income to pay for the protection. But the way he looked at it is them generating some income selling puts allows them to sell their calls a little further out of the money to still achieve the same goal, but now it gives them more room for the stock to run where they can capture it. So I like that explanation that he gave. Okay, Astera. Now, obviously, it's not going to be the case every time where there's more room. Friday was a very odd trading day. If you take a look, it looked like it was going to continue the terrible day that we were having previously. And then, so they probably, after this horrible drop, sold their calls, and then we had a big return on the end of the day. So we're going to see a lot of that. Astera Lab calls are sold at 1.2 and 2.7% out of the money. 167.50 and 170. Cash, they've got 170 million. And government obligation funds, 348, almost 349 million. The two total up to $519 million. That's kind of on the sidelines. Cipher Mining, calls are sold at 22.50 and 27. They're 8.7 and 30% out of the money. They're selling puts there as well. Coinbase, calls are sold at 312.50 and 331 and 6% out of the money. They also have a put spread sold after they finish out their collar strategy, selling 310s that are actually in the money at this point by about 0.25%. CoreWeave, they have 117 and 120 calls sold, 12.5 and 15% out of the money, selling puts as well. Galaxy Digital, no shares are owned, but they've got a put spread sold at 30, 4.9% out of the money. Hims and Hers, calls are sold at 42 and 45. They're 2.3 and 9.7% out of the money. Puts again sold to help with that. Robinhood Markets, calls are sold at 135. They're 3.5% out of the money. Iron, their calls are sold at 67 and 68, 7.4 and 9% out of the money. Selling puts as well. So we're seeing a whole lot more of the selling puts than a handful of weeks ago. Lululemon, we got another put spread here, selling the 162.50. They are 2.1% out of the money. MP Material Corp, $58 and $62 calls sold, 1% in the money and 5.8% out. Puts are sold about 18 to 19% out. We've got a couple more put spreads here. MSTR, no shares, selling the 250. They're 3.3% in the money. And Netflix selling the 1050s, 1050, I should say, 4.8% out of the money. Oklo, calls are sold at 116. They're just about 3% out. Puts are sold nearly 29% out of the money. Oracle, it's another put spread with no shares. Puts are sold at 240, 0.3% out of the money. Palantir, calls are sold at 180. They're 1.1% out. Quantum Computing, selling calls at 1450. They are 12.7% out of the money. Rocket Labs, $55 and $61 calls are 6.5 and 18% out of the money. I don't know if you guys can hear my dog just walking circles around me. I keep hearing his nails on the floor. Puts sold as well, 12 to 22% out. New Scale Power, $29.50 is the strike price on the sold calls. They're 2.7% out. So let's look at New Scale. They most likely had a big day, big change Friday. So as you can see, starting the day, way up here is the break-even line from the market close the day before. So they started well below and went lower. So you're not going to sell your calls way up high, but then they went all the way up. Let's see, you got like a $4 price change intraday on a $30 stock, more than 10% move late in the day. So that took those calls into the money. SoFi selling calls at 31, just about 10% out. Soundhound calls are sold at 15.50, 9.6% out of the money. And Symbotic sold their calls at 71 and 73, 1.7 and 4.5% out of the money. This is there is no $101,000 loss over the weekend. It's just sometimes the closing price on the downloads compared to the closing price that Excel is pulling from the finance app are off by a penny or two, and it turns into small changes over hundreds of millions of dollars. All right, there's just over $2 billion in assets under management, so we've dropped from like 3.5 down to 2. People running from the fund at this point, 20 million plus shares dropped off of the outstanding shares, bringing it down to 445,075,000. NAV at the close 459, so it was actually trading at a 2-cent discount at the end of the day. And that's all I've got for you on ULTY for the week ahead and the payment guesstimate. Okay, SLTY. They made approximately 170 trades over the course of the week, closing out their position in Charter Communications on Tuesday. On Wednesday, they started shorting Robinhood, AppLovin, Expedia, and they closed out Kratos Defense and SMCI. Thursday, just regular trading, no exchanging of shares, and then Friday, shorting more shares of Applied and Energy Fuels, closing out their Qualcomm, Robinhood, Expedia positions, their shorts, and also shorting Lumentum, Ouster, more shares of SanDisk, more shares of Credo, and Uniqure, however you want to say it. So all in all, 170 trades over the course of the week, none on Monday. They lost 216,000 on Tuesday, lost another 355,000 on Wednesday, lost another 19,000 on Thursday, and lost 250,000 on Friday. So if you understand the way this fund works, it's the reverse or the opposite of ULTY. So they short shares instead of buying them, and then they sell puts to generate income and buy calls to protect them. So if you are selling puts and the market drops the way it did this past week, your puts are going to go in the money and you're going to have to pay to close them out. But that's going to make the value of your shorted shares work in your favor. So what we saw over the course of the week was a $841,000 trading loss paired with a 1.1, almost $1.2 million increase in the value of the shares. So income-wise, that's based just off of the realized gains and losses. Obviously, it was a loss and a large one, $1.40 to the negative. So that's not going to be the payment. Next, they tell us to look at the implied volatility. So again, doing things a little different because that part just gets a little too monotonous for me. 4.76% is the average holding within the fund. These are fairly even allocated unless something really worked in their favor and jumps big. So Applied Digital is on the bigger end. Circle Internet Group a little low, 3.8. Credo a little high, 7.6. A lot of these are in the 2s and 3s. Centrus Energy, they might be the smallest holding within the fund. They are at 2.1%. But let's see. The largest appears to be that 8+%. So Applied Digital is the largest position within the fund. As far as implied volatility, right, the higher means that they're going to be able to collect a lot more premium selling options on those. So Applied has a 115, AST Space Mobile's got a 116, BitDeer with a 111, Circle Internet Group 101, Credo Technology 109. So these are really high numbers. IonQ 95, Centrus 106. Nebius Group 114, Uniqure, this is a new one, 137. That's crazy. Riot Platforms 93, SanDisk 111, and Energy Fuels 109. Now I forgot to mention it. I give them free advertising every time I do these videos because I'm not sponsored, but Market Chameleon is where I go to collect this information on implied volatility. But in any case, 7 of the underlyings had increased IV, 11 were decreased, and 3 were no change. That resulted in a weighted average of 93.39 for the total of the fund. That is an increase from last week's 92.48. We're going to combine that with the closing price of 38.32. That's also an increase from last week. So last week they paid 53.56 and moved up about $1 and increased in implied volatility. So The IV estimate is 68.82. Now, I don't quite think that they're going to go that far, especially after having a $1.40 loss in options trading sides of things. But I do think it's going to be higher than last week's 53, and by a good bit. So I'm going with 64%. I think they're going to be a higher percentage payer than ULTY. All right, when we switch over and take a look at the fund, basically going to go through. So they are going to do a reverse collar strategy. I explained that already. So I'm going to just go through just to make sure I read off the name of each underlying. So if nothing else, you see what the professionals have a negative bias on and are shorting. And I'm going to just tell you the put strike price that they have selected. So Advanced Micro Devices, they're selling puts at 232.50. Applied Digital puts are sold at 27. AppLovin puts are sold at 580. AST Space Mobile puts are sold at 63. BitDeer Technologies Group selling puts at 20. Circle Internet Group puts are sold at 105. Credo Technology selling puts at 147. Carvana puts are sold at 287.50. Enphase Energy puts are at 28.50. IonQ at 49.50. Centrus Energy at 300. Lumentum selling puts at 230. Lemonade puts are sold at 73. Moderna $23.50 puts. Nebius Group $99 puts. Ouster $23.50 puts. I still don't know if I'm saying this right. Unique Cure $26 put strike price. Reddit is at 175. Riot's at 15.50. And then SanDisk has two selected strike prices, 200 and 212.50, and Energy Fuels as well, 14.50 and 15.50. All right, there's $22.6 million in assets under management. People did buy into this fund on Friday, 50,000 more shares, bringing the outstanding shares up to 600,000. When we talked about those puts, the average put is about 7% out of the money, which means the underlyings within this fund can drop by, on average, 7%, and that can be captured by the share price without having to pay large amounts of money to close out those trades. Obviously, that's just an average. As you can see, AMD can't drop 7% before they go in the money. They're 0.45% out. But there are others that say IonQ that could drop nearly 16% before they go in the money. This is a little bit surprising. So their NAV is at 37.83. They're actually trading at a fairly large premium. So it's at 17.49 premium. Kind of surprised to see that much. And if you looked at them in their after hours, they were actually even up further, up to 39 on Friday. 39.01. So maybe people are starting to think that the market's starting to turn and the bull market might be over and they want to start betting against it. So that's kind of what this fund's for, if that's how you feel. But okay, real quick recap. ULTY guesstimate 7.75 cents. Oh, that would be at 88%. So that would actually beat SLTY. SLTY's at 87% with a 64-cent guesstimate. We'll find out on Tuesday, and we'll get paid on Thursday. All right, so I got a dad joke for you if you made it this far. Appreciate you guys watching, and likes, shares, and comments. Everything is appreciated, and so I will try to make you laugh with a joke. So, fun fact, koi fish always travel in groups of 4. If attacked, koi A, B, and C scatter, leaving just the D koi. All right. Thank you for watching, and have a good rest of your weekend.